I'm Chris, this is Offbeat Builds, and today I'm going to show you how to kitbash fairly run-of-the-mill Warhammer 40,000 vehicles to give them more character. First up, we need a couple of guinea pigs. The humble Razorback, or is it a Rhino? And that old favourite, the Leman Russ battle tank. Let's start at the front. An easy way to make a tank look more purposeful is to add a giant oversized novelty plough to the pointy end. In the case of the Rhino chassis, I cut down an old vindicated Dozer blade that I've had in the bits box for years, but one from the Imperial Guard tank accessory sprue is also a great option. After its date with the razor saw and some benevolent erosion from the jaggy paper, the top edge needed some reinforcement. This came courtesy of our good old friend styrene, in this case in the form of a 3x2mm rectangle. As for the mounts, the Vindicator shield does come with them, so in the spirit of keeping life simple, I used the parts so generously provided by Captain Workshop. Though I didn't glue on the Dozer blade itself at this stage to make life easier for that whole painting malarkey. Dozer blades are great for smashing your way through the detritus of the 41st millennium, but how do you deal with things that go pop and live underground? Well, this is the Trojan Armoured Engineering Vehicle, and it thinks mines are a delicacy. Scratch building the complex geometry of this kind of mine plough for the Russ would have taken more time than I had available for the project, so I fired up the Commodore 64 and braved the digital realm. The resultant print looked almost exactly like this, and if you want your own one, I've put a link to the STL I created in the video description. Now, I could have modelled the mount as well, but I wanted to keep this tank agnostic, so I broke out the white stuff again. Some 1mm styrene formed the base plate, while the arms, I guess, were constructed from some 2x2mm profile. I'm trying to let the pictures do much of the talking here, because I've covered building with styrene so many times on the channel that the words are starting to lose any sort of connection to... Anyway, with the basic form of the mount taking shape, I de-ribbed the Russ, which is an odd thing to say on tape. But after some consideration with the sanding stick, the home for the mine plough was ready. Now, here's an example of intrusive thoughts taking over. I wanted to make the plough removable for a later crayoning session, but didn't fancy breaking out the magnets, so I present to you paperclip clamps. Surprisingly effective. Oh look, rivets. With the Russ now firmly in its barber phase, let's give the Rhino chassis a profession. If we assume that whole codex compliance thing is just a set of loose guidelines, then we can do whatever we want. And what I want to do is kit this thing out for urban combat. So I'm going to replace the windscreen armour with mesh for that Riot control vehicle vibe. But first, some words about a desk. This is the Flexispot E7 Plus standing desk. It's got 4 legs, which is twice as much as most other standing desks on the market. While this is mathematically superior, in the real world that means more stability, especially when the desk is raised to higher settings and under load. Speaking of which, this supports up to 200 kilograms, or about twice as much as those 2-leg desks that I mentioned. With strength and stability in mind, I tried out some basic and some not so basic model making activities with the E7 Plus, and I have to say, it was solid as a rock. As far as desks go, this is tall, the tallest 4-leg standing desk on the market. It'll raise all the way up to 51.75 inches, more than tall enough to play a game of Warhammer 40,000 underneath. The E7 Plus is competitively priced compared to other similar desks on the market, which regularly reach over the $1,000 mark, and it's supplied with a 15-year warranty, which is nice. Also nice are the customization options, which are handily visualized on the website, allowing you to choose from a selection of different sizes and materials to suit your space and aesthetic. Flexispot is having a mega sale at the moment, so don't miss out on the chance to get your own E7 Plus 4-leg standing desk, or if you're a little bit more budget conscious, you can choose the E7 Premium desk. You can use my code YTE7P50 for $50 off. As a socially responsible company, Flexispot also offers special discounts to military, students, doctors and more. Click the link in the description now. Back in the world of plastic, I made a frame from 1mm styrene sheet and drilled out the corners to reduce the possibility of the frame splitting when I cut it. These were then connected with some delicate cuts with a fresh blade before liberating the whole piece from the sheet and getting in some close-up sanding sponge action. As for the mesh, there are two materials that I favour, and I went for the metal one this time because of reasons that I'm sure were very clear to me at the time. This was then secured to the frame with some CA glue and then to the Rhino hull using a combination of CA glue and blind faith. Rivets were required and they needed to fit the aesthetic of the existing model, so I drilled some 1mm holes to a depth of 0.5 mm. These hemispherical voids were then filled with 1mm ball bearings, leaving only the top half visible. Neat. With the screen windows in place and the windscreens now Molotov resistant, the front armour was attached to the rest of the hull. And being the rebellious sort, I decided I'd muddy the waters about whether this is a Rhino, a Razorback or something entirely different by building a twin-linked heavy flamer turret. Sure, it's not tournament legal, but that would require a significant Google Maps related fiasco for me to find myself in that particular situation. Anyway, let's check back on Leman Russ, to use his full name. Through the majesty of the montage, work is progressing marvellously, so let's talk about another of my favourite tricks for making vehicles look lived in: stowage. Off-the-shelf stowage items don't really bend to fit the space, so we're going to have to break out the putty if we want to make it look, good. And the secret to making it all fit nicely are blanket rolls, tarpaulins, camo nets, tents and other floppy things. Making these is dead simple. Flatten out some putty to a reasonably uniform thickness, cut it into a rectangle and then roll it into a supremely toxic Swiss roll. I then like to press in a little valley where the strips will be placed. This doesn't have to be all that neat since it's going to be covered up in a moment. To make our roll look more like it's made from a flexible material, we need to press in some crease marks around the future location of those straps. I then added the uncured putty roll to the model, with a few drops of superglue to help adhesion once the green stuff stops being sticky. Adding it to the model while the putty's still flexible allows you to contort the shape to fit the space, which I recall saying was sort of the entire point. The straps themselves were also cut from thin slivers of putty and bedded into the roll with a drop or two of superglue. You do have a little bit of time to work here, which is handy for obvious reasons. I then repeated the process multiple times with various shapes of roll and pack to fill the space I had available, adding in a Cadian radio pack with the antenna disconnected for a little bit of storytelling. To give the putty some time to harden, I broke out the plastic to build an ammo crate. Now, forming a simple wooden crate at this scale is a breeze, as you can cheat and use layers of sheet material to represent planks, before throwing a few bits of plastic scrap at it and calling it done. To bed in our new box friend into the top of the turret, I folded up a tarpaulin and glued it in place on the rear counterweight, before pushing the newly minted crate into the still soft green stuff. This was joined by a large blanket roll on the rear of the turret and a pair of fuel canisters for a flamer, again for storytelling reasons that will hopefully become apparent later. The other side of the Russ hull got a smattering of stowage before impulsivity got the better of me and I broke out a power tool. In order to make some tie-down ropes for the stowage, I used the power of rotation to braid a pair of 0.3mm copper jewellery wires. It's chunky, but it's Games Workshop chunky. The overscale, but in a good way, rope was cut into appropriate lengths and added to the model to add some, dare I say it, plausibility, as well as some textural variety. And, being the crafty sort, I coiled the remainder of the wire rope around a pen and threw it on the back of the model to add to the stowage pile. Let's check in on the Rhino enclosure to see what's occurring. Magic! Now, of course, you could save yourself a lot of hassle and just buy some chapter doors for your tank, but if they're not available for your vehicle or your chapter, then tedious cutting and filing is the best option, and it's almost free, which, does appeal. I like to add whip antennas to any vehicle I can get away with, and today is no different. I found this old Baneblade aerial in the bits box, and chose to harvest the springy, strain reliefy bit from the base to use on the Rhino. And with a little bit of drilling, gluing and some lightly bent 1mm brass rod, I had myself a whip. The final part of the puzzle was a searchlight, and a nice one comes with the Russ kit, but I broke with tradition and did things the needlessly complicated way. A section of styrene tube was capped on one side with some 1mm styrene sheet, which, once cured, was cut and sanded down into a almost perfect circle. The useful end of the searchlight was provided by this lens, again from the bits box, which I can't quite trace the origin, and if you have any ideas where it's from, call out my lackluster memory in the comments. More of that plastic tube was employed to make the yoke for the lamp assembly, and was then combined with various sections of plastic rod to create the mount and some bolt heads. And things were looking pretty lampy. Being the cautious sort, I thought I should probably pin this onto the top of the cupola, to protect against those all too not too rare enough moments where I have the dexterity of a lawn chair. And with that, the Rhino was complete. The goal was to create a vehicle that looks like it's been lightly modified to take on a close support role in an urban environment, and I think it just about does that. Anyway, back to the russet. Possibly the simplest way to add character to a vehicle is to give it the human, or not, touch. For my minesweeping vehicle, it would have been all too easy to go down the meme route. But I figured, why not do something with a similar energy, but ever so slightly more practical? Sure, it's not game legal, but honestly, who cares? Little touches like this add to the narrative of the model, and isn't that kind of the point of kitbashing stuff in the first place? I chose the Russ and Rhino because they exemplify the type of vehicle that you may have multiples of in an army, or to put it another way, I wanted to make the ubiquitous, run-of-the-mill choices seem a little bit more interesting. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, or at least you learned something along the way. But failing that, I hope whatever you watch next will provide you with sufficient dopamine.